Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Making Disciples. My name is Chris and I am your host. I hope you're doing all right. Hope life is treating you well. Now, over this term on the podcast, we've been looking at something we would call the 7 heavenly virtues. And I had a brilliant email from one of you guys this week, one of our listeners, who said, you keep mentioning the heavenly virtues, and you've also mentioned something called the 7 deadly sins. What is that? I was like, oh, actually, it's interesting. I haven't mentioned much about the 7 deadly sins. In many ways, they come from a much more Catholic background, and the 7 deadly sins are the 7 major character defaults of people that are not following Jesus, or we can experience as followers of Jesus. And then in contrast to them, you've got something called the 7 heavenly virtues, and they are completely and utterly man-made, fabricated ideas that are based on the Bible. And what they are is a way of trying to teach people a way of life that honors Jesus from his teaching. So everything within these heavenly virtues and everything within the 7 deadly sins all comes from Scripture. It's all biblical. It's all biblically rooted. But as a way of trying to make them catchy, sticky, memorable, and trying to help people really explore what is it that God is requiring of you. These ideas of the 7 deadly sins, and in contrast to that, or the antidote to them, you've got the 7 heavenly virtues. And so we've been walking through these virtues. Why are we looking through them? Well, I read a book a little while ago that I just felt was so helpful in terms of me and my discipleship, by looking at the heavenly virtues, the things that God is calling us to do and to behave. We don't behave well to earn God's approval. We want to behave the way God wants us to behave because of what he has done for us, because of his love. And then when we've encountered his love, we want to love him back and behave in a way that strengthens that relationship that we have with him. So that's the 7 heavenly virtues and the 7 deadly sins. Maybe we look at the 7 deadly sins, but I think we're kind of touching on them as we're looking at the heavenly virtues. And we certainly will today, because we're going to look at today the heavenly virtue of what's called charity. Now, when you and I think of charity, we think of charity work. We think about going and doing something for the poor. We give money to charities. Charities do work to help people. Therefore, we give money, or we volunteer these charities to help them fulfill their goal. And that's how we think of charity. But actually, charity is much bigger than that in terms of a Christian virtue, and that's what we'll explore today. What does it mean to be people of charity? So today's topic, living out the love of God in a way that heals the world. Is essentially the idea of charity, living out the love of God in a way that heals the world. Living that life is one of charity. So that's what we're going to explore today in today's topic. It's probably not going to be a very long episode, partly because I think I want to keep it quite tight. I think a tight way of exploring this. So we'll dive straight in. Well, friends, it's lovely having you with us on the podcast today, particularly as we explore this topic of charity. Let's explore this then. So today's topic, charity, and in some ways it's sometimes described as the crown of the virtues. It's a way of life that really manifests itself and finds itself in your heart. And if you have a heart that is bent towards the world, towards others, then you are to be somebody who's loving, compassionate, caring. So charity comes as a part of that. If you have a heart that's bent inward, self-seeking, about your own needs, your own desires, then actually you have a heart that's really towards yourself, and therefore you don't function out of charity. So what does charity look like in the everyday? And I want to argue it's more than you giving money to a charity. It's more than you serving an organisation that has a charitable cause. It's far more than that. So let's just think about this theologically. So the word charity is actually a Latin word, and it's the word charitas, C-A-R-I-T-A-S, charitas. And it means it's a divine love that is expressed through action. It's a divine love that is expressed through action. So can you see how our understanding of charity, it could be quite different to this idea of charity in the 7 heavenly virtues. So if you see charity as simply helping someone else, doing kind things for someone, then actually you're missing the point of biblical, or the charity that we're talking about here. So the charity we're talking about here, charitas, it means a divine love that we express to the world through action. So it's a love that we share with the world, and we put flesh and blood on it by the way that we then act, behave, or engage with the world. So charity is more than giving of money. And there's a guy called Aquinas, he's a church father, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he describes it as it's willing the good for another, the willing of the good for another. So it's when you meet someone else, it's wanting the other person to succeed. It's wanting the other person to thrive. So it's very much about wanting good things for the person in front of you. It's not about you wanting to do good things. It's you wanting good things for the other. So much of charity, I talked to somebody very recently who talked about the work that they do. They love serving at charity because of the way it makes them feel. Now, it's good to be charitable, isn't it? And it's good to feel good. But actually, this idea of caritas, the Latin here, divine love expressed through action. This divine love does not do what it does because it makes itself feel better. So God's love does not exist or fulfill itself because of what he has done for us. It's this divine love. It's about willing the good for the other, wanting the good for somebody else. It's not about how you feel. It's about you doing something that transforms the person's life in front of you. So it's quite different, I would say, from the charity or the experience we have of being charitable. Maybe that kind of modern idea. It's more than an emotional affection of generosity. It's more than wanting to be generous because of how it makes you feel. Charity, in terms of this caritas, it's about a generosity that comes from a sacrificial place. When God is charitable to us by sending his son, it's a costly one where actually God does not benefit. He ends up losing out, killing of himself, dying himself for someone else. So what we're talking about here is not a generosity that comes from an emotional place that makes us feel good. It comes from a sacrificial place that comes out of the very nature of who God is. So that's what charity is in terms of what we're talking about. So what is it the antidote to? Like, why did they come up with this idea of charity? Well, actually, it's the antidote to the vice of greed. Greed. And what is greed? Greed is when we want more of something else, even though we don't need more of that thing, but we want more of that thing. And there's a fulfillment in us, or a semi-fulfillment, found in having more of it. So greed is when you take one more thing than you need. And you're essentially lining your pocket or lining your stomach with something more than what you actually require. That is greed. And it's the love of possession, and it's a love of self-interest rather than the thing that you want. So actually, when you take more money than you need or more food than you need, it's a love of possessing, and it's about self-interest, me benefiting. So it's about a love of a thing that narrows our heart rather than expanding our hearts. So greed narrows our hearts down as we desire that thing rather than expanding our heart. Generosity expands, greed narrows. So what does it say in Matthew 6:4? You cannot serve both God and mammoth, or God and money. Loving God expands the heart, loving money narrows the heart. And this is what we see in 1 Corinthians 13, the whole passage. Love is patient, love is kind. When we love God, experience his love, that expands something in us, and we become more patient, become more kind, and we become more charitable. Our lives become more charitable. So it's more than loving God as this transformative thing in us. Our hearts expand, and now we love the other, love the world more than we love self. So rather than function out of greed, stockpiling, we function out of generosity, charity, which is expansive. So charity frees us from the illusion of scarcity by trusting God's abundance. Charity frees us from the illusion of scarcity. So charity is the antidote to greed. Greed is the desire to stockpile more of something in our lives. It'd be worth just pausing for a second and saying, what is it that you are greedy for? What is it you are greedy for? Because you can be greedy for money. You can be greedy for a product, having more of something than you need. You could be greedy for time from somebody, taking more time and energy out of someone. You can be greedy in the way that you collect something more than you require. Food, eating, all of this stuff. So charity comes as the generosity that breaks the back of this vice called greed. So one of the areas that you may become more charitable is around patience. So just think about this for a second. When you have someone in front of you that is irritating you, you can respond by being charitable, or you can respond by being uncharitable. When you're being uncharitable, you can be intolerant, you can get angry with them quite quickly, become quite impatient, we can become arrogant with them, can become quite closed off to the other person. Why should I waste my time on them? It's lack of generosity, being greedy for our time. I want to make my time my own. So we end up being impatient with somebody. And what patience does, it cultivates compassion, it cultivates forgiveness, and it cultivates gratitude, and it cultivates this sense of generosity, being charitable to somebody else, allowing to understand the situation from somebody else's perspective. So charity in terms of patience can allow you to become forgiving, compassionate, cultivating time to listen to somebody else and the needs that they have. That's all internal. Externally, it could become acts of service, generosity, advocacy for justice, and that kind of thing. So charity is more, you can see, this is much more than doing charitable work. Your heart can become more charitable in the way that it engages with somebody that is really winding you up. And I think that's one of the things I found. Often when you come across somebody who's just really worked up by other people all the time, they're quite angry all the time, seem to be quite frustrated all the time. They're functioning out of a possessiveness that actually the spiritual gift of charity breaks the back of that, so that we become more charitable people. So practical examples of this: choosing to be empathetic, having empathy for somebody else in conflict. Could I see this from a different perspective? It can manifest itself in quiet acts of kindness, little things. You know, you might think, oh, they don't deserve it, but I'm choosing to be generous towards them. And that generosity leads to acts of kindness. It can lead to you giving time or attention when it's not even convenient for you. You know, it's too easy to go, it's not convenient right now, be gone. What charity does is it allows us to be giving of our time and our attention. So my reflection on this for us would be probably something around charity allows us to partake in God's own behaviour, character and life. When we're living out this nature of being charitable, we are participating in God's own behaviour, God's own attitude, God's own activity. And it's about pouring out love in and out of ourselves into the world. Being charitable, allowing ourselves to be poured out for others when the situation around us probably doesn't warrant it. Freely giving ourselves. At the heart of the giving of Jesus is the heart of God being charitable towards us. Now, the church fathers talked about charity a lot. It was if you're looking at the first 500 years of the Christian faith, the act of being charitable is at the heart. So Augustine, who's one of the early church fathers, talked about charity quite a lot in his teaching. And he says that charity isn't a substitute for justice withheld. And I thought that was a really interesting phrase. And you might go, what's that mean, Chris? Charity is no substitute for justice withheld. And I think that's a really interesting... I want to tell you a story. And this story is a bit of a parable, really. It's a non-biblical parable. It's a parable that kind of gets pulled out now and again. There's a story of a river, and there's a group of villagers, and they live right on this river. And one day they're out there on the side of the river, and one day they noticed there was a baby floating downstream. You could almost think about Moses, couldn't you, in his Moses basket? You know, this baby floating down the stream. And this lady goes into the water, and she pulls out, she rescues the baby from the river as it goes downstream. The next day, they're outside the river again, but this time there are two babies now floating down the river. And as the days go on, it just grows. It becomes more and more babies floating down the river. Soon it's dozens of babies floating down the river, and the villagers are going in teams to pull out these children from the river and feed them, giving them shelters, giving them home. So that's charity, isn't it? When you're being kind and you take somebody into your own home, you're being charitable. But the story goes on. One day, rather than jumping in the stream to pull out the children, there's a lady who leaves others to do that. And she goes walking upstream. And one of the villagers shouts to her, "Where are you going? We need you here. We need your help here." And she replies, "I'm going to find out who's throwing the babies in the river. Going to find out who's throwing the babies in the river." See, the rescuers showed charity, but the woman sought justice. And friends, both are needed. Both are needed, but justice prevents the need for endless charity. And I just thought that's a really interesting story. I'm not sure where I found it. Not sure where I first heard it. But simply put, charity addresses the immediate need, but justice addresses the actual issues. And what St. Augustine was saying is charity is essential. We need to be people of charity. We need to be living that out. But actually, we also need to be people of justice. People who are looking to go beyond the kindness to actually get to the root issue here and to be people who bring total transformation. And I think that's really important to recognise. So charity is the antidote to greed. But we have to go beyond charity. And we need to be people who seek justice. So the question for us is then, where are we being called to live more freely with what God has given us? Where are we being called to live more freely with what God has given us, rather than people who stockpile up actually becoming people who give away, generously given away. So, who might need our attention? Who might need our compassion? Who might need our charity, or for us to be generous towards them, even though they don't warrant it in the sense of maybe their behaviour, but who might need our charity so that we may live out this act of love that God has acted out to us. And it says in Scripture that before we even realised it, God saw us from a distance and came towards us. Before we ever repented, God first came towards us. And that's what charity does. It's choosing to reach out a hand to somebody else, even though they may not have done anything yet to deserve it. So going back to the beginning, the Latin for charity is translated as divine love expressed through action. And divine love is always a sacrificial love. It's a costly love. It's not just a love that's being kind, it's a love that goes beyond being kind. So the challenge to you and I is, we're going to live out this virtue. Who might we need to give attention to? Who might we need to show compassion to? Who might we need to show charity to this week to live that out? So friends, I'm going to leave that with you. And I love the idea of the babies. How do we go from being people who just take the babies out of the water to become people who go to look at what is the justice issue here? The thing that goes beyond the immediate need. Friends, until next time, grace and peace. Have a good week, and we will catch up soon.